A young nurse saved a plane from crashing when both pilots passed out midair. 24 hours later, she received a shocking invitation from the president. What she did while flying the plane left everyone in deep shock. It was on a quiet Saturday morning when Emilia Castillo boarded a plane from Barcelona bound for Paris, unaware of what was about to unfold. An event that would change her life forever. It was Easter break, and with the hospital quiet, her nursing schedule finally giving her a breather, she decided to spend a week with her mama y papa. Her mother had been begging her to come home for months. Her father, he'd simply sent her a text. Cielos despejados. Ven a casa, mi cielo. The Josep Tarradellas, Barcelona El Prat airport bustled with life. Families headed off on spring vacations. Children clutched chocolate conejitos, and laughter drifted through the terminals like music. Emilia, dressed in her nursing school hoodie and jeans, walked quietly to gate 17, clutching her worn leather backpack. Inside were two things that defined her: medical textbooks and a thick stack of aviation manuals that few would expect from a nurse in training. As Flight 628 lifted off and the Catalan landscape grew smaller beneath her, Emilia leaned into the window, eyes tracing the clouds. A soft smile played on her lips. Suddenly, a memory played in her mind, vivid and warm. She was 10 again in the small garage behind their old casa in Girona. Her father, Capitan Juan Castillo, retired now, but once the most respected pilot in the region, was hooking up an old flight simulator. The clack of plastic buttons, the hum of the screen, the excitement in her chest as he handed her the joystick. Timón a la izquierda, firme. Ahora nívela. Bien. Mira, tienes manos para esto, he said with pride, his calloused hand resting gently on hers. Nunca subestimes lo que has aprendido, mi cielo. Algún día podría importar. Back in the present, the flight attendants moved down the aisles. Passengers chatted casually, the soft rumble of the engines steady beneath their feet. Some were reading, some dozing off. It all felt so ordinary. But at 30,000 feet above the clouds, fate was writing a new chapter for Emilia Castillo, one that would take her from a quiet nursing student to a name the world would never forget. Not a single soul on Flight 628 could sense the storm silently approaching at 30,000 feet above the patchwork of clouds drifting over southern France. Flight 628 cruised as if nothing could disturb its serenity. The seatbelt sign was off. Drinks clinked gently on trays. A soft hum from the engines created a strange, comforting rhythm. Somewhere near the middle of the plane, a baby cooed. A couple in business class whispered over copas de cava, and the man in 14C snored gently against the window. Emilia sat in 18A, a quiet space near the wing, her tray table down, her attention drifting between the latest chapter of her nursing review book and a half-played aviation simulation video, paused on her tablet. The mix of medicine and flight in her world always drew puzzled glances, but she never bothered explaining. Both had been her life since childhood. Both still were. She had just taken a sip of zumo de manzana when it started. At first, it was subtle, a small jolt. A few heads turned, brows lifted, but no one panicked. Then came a second, stronger shake. Une. The overhead bins rattled. A murmur rose across the cabin. The plane dropped slightly, then steadied. People looked at one another with quiet concern. Turbulence, they assumed. Nothing more. Then came the third jolt, violent and sudden. The aircraft shuddered with a sound like tearing metal. A shriek echoed from the back. Oxygen masks dropped like ghostly pendulums from the ceiling. Trays flew, drinks spilled, books crashed to the floor. The cabin plunged into chaos. Emilia's heart thudded. She grabbed the armrests, her eyes darting to the emergency pamphlet she had long ago memorized. She looked up, masks everywhere. A flight attendant screamed as she stumbled down the aisle, clutching the wall, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. Emilia felt the plane tilt slightly. Something was wrong, more than turbulence. Much more. In the cockpit, hidden from passengers, Capitan Rodrigo Diaz gripped his chest with a grunt. His vision blurred. The familiar hum of instruments around him sounded far away, as if underwater. The co-pilot, Miguel Herrera, leaned toward him. "Capitán, ¿estás bien?" But the Capitán didn't answer. His fingers tightened around the yoke, then slipped. His body slumped sideways, falling hard against the window with a dull thud. Miguel lunged toward him but fumbled, knocking the radio headset aside. He reached for the controls, hands shaking, his voice thick with fear crackling through the comms. Mayday. Before he too staggered, gasping, his face paling. Within seconds, he collapsed forward, arms limp across the controls. In the cabin, the intercom went dead, static, then silence. That silence was loud, heavier than any sound. People began to shout. Someone cried. Children whimpered. A man stood yelling, "Que pasa?" But no one answered. The plane had begun to drift, not dive, but it was clear no one was flying it. The flight attendants were frozen, white-faced, wide-eyed. One ran for the cockpit, but found the door locked. Emilia sat motionless for a second. Then she unbuckled her seatbelt. Something inside her, instinctual, trained, took over. She moved down the aisle as if in a dream. Two others stood as she moved. One was a middle-aged woman with a Cruz Roja badge pinned to her hoodie. The other, a tall man in a navy blazer, spoke first. "Soy médico," he called out. "Déjenme pasar," the woman followed. "Paramedica aquí." The three rushed to the front, navigating the panicked sea of passengers. Emilia was quiet, focused. She didn't say a word, not yet. The medico and paramedica pounded on the cockpit door. No response. "Abran esto!" The medico shouted to a flight attendant fumbling with the emergency override key. The door clicked open, revealing both pilots out cold. The cabin crew gasped. The paramedica moved fast, checking pulses. The medico pulled a stethoscope from her carry-on, examining the Capitán's chest. "So, infarto?" she muttered. "Masivo, no responde." "Yell?" Emilia asked, pointing to the co-pilot. The paramedica knelt beside him. "Pulso débil, respira, podría ser hipoxia o shock." She looked up. "Pero ninguno está pilotando este avión." A beat passed, then another. Panic spread. "Not." From the rear, someone hyperventilated. A woman screamed. Another vomited into a sick bag. A man ran toward the cockpit, blocked by a flight attendant shouting, "Atrás!" The plane shuddered again, dipping slightly. Emilia scanned the cockpit, the blinking instruments, the open skies, the vast panel of controls so familiar yet terrifying. Her father's voice came back, calm and steady. "Sabes lo que significa cada dial? Has aterrizado 100 vuelos, mi cielo." Even if it was just a game, only this wasn't a game. She looked at the paramedica, the medico. The pilot slumped over, the horror in the flight attendant's face. Then Emilia stepped forward. "Say pilotar." Her voice wasn't loud, but clear, calm, like she'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. Everyone turned. The medico blinked. "Dechi qué?" "He entrenado en simuladores de vuelo desde niña," she said, words quick but even. "Mi papá es piloto retirado. Me enseñó todo. Instrumentos, procedimientos, aterrizajes, lo he hecho por años." The paramedica looked skeptical. "Eso no es lo mismo que pilotar un avión real. Lo sé, pero es lo que tenemos." The medico hesitated. The paramedica glanced at the unconscious co-pilot. "Has volado un simulador de avión comercial?" the flight attendant asked, breathless. "Cientos de horas." A pause, a collective silence, a suspended breath. Then the paramedica stepped aside. "Está bien," she said. "Hazlo." Emilia took the Capitán's seat. Her hands hovered above the controls. She took a deep breath, reached for the headset, and slipped it on. "Aquivuelo 628, she spoke into the mic. "Tenemos una emergencia. Ambos pilotos están inconscientes." "I repeat, both pilots are unconscious. Soy civil con experiencia en simuladores. Solicito asistencia inmediata." Static. Then a crackling voice broke through. Vuelo 628. Aquí control de tráfico aéreo. Repita, digo que ambos pilotos están caídos. Sí, Amelia replied, her voice steady despite the fear clawing inside. Ambos están inconscientes. Hay un médico atendiéndolos. Soy la única disponible para pilotar el avión. A pause, then a calmer, older voice, perhaps a flight operations manager. Entendido. 628. ¿Con quién hablo? Emilia Castillo. Emilia, ¿tienes acceso a los controles? Sí. Bien. Emilia, te ayudaremos. No estás sola. Primero, confirma tu altitud y rumbo actual. And just like that, the world shifted. A 21-year-old nurse in training, taught by her father in a Girona garage, was now piloting a commercial aircraft through the skies of Europe. Behind her, hundreds of passengers sat in stunned silence. To Sue, some sobbed quietly, others held hands. Parents rocked children. No one spoke, but they all looked forward toward the cockpit, toward the girl with fire in her eyes and steady hands. Amelia didn't know if she'd succeed, but she knew she had to try, because up here at 30,000 feet, fate had stopped waiting for heroes. The low hum of the engines was the only sound in the cockpit, a rhythm too calm for the chaos outside. Emilia Castillo's knuckles were white against the yoke, her hands trembling slightly. The plane, once soaring steadily, now felt like a pájaro struggling to stay aloft. The altitude was dropping, slowly at first, then faster. She heard the faint crackling of the radio as air traffic control's voice came through, crisp and urgent. Vuelo 628. Estás descendiendo demasiado rápido. Ajusta el compensador. Desciende a 10,000 pies y reporta. Amelia's breath caught, her heart racing, but she forced calm. Lo tengo, she whispered, echoing her father's words from years of simulations. She pushed aside fear, focusing. Every move was calculated, every action deliberate. Her hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting the trim, pulling back on the yoke to stabilize the descent. She tapped the flaps into place, the aircraft responding with a reassuring hum. The steady pace she'd worked to maintain was slipping. Warning alarms screamed in the cockpit. Altitude, the machine demanded. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the rising panic. Another voice crackled over the comms, calm but authoritative. Emilia, escucha con atención. Te redirigimos al aeropuerto más cercano. Prepárate para un aterrizaje de emergencia. She nodded, though no one could see, adjusting vectors as air traffic control dictated. The wind was picking up. Outside, clear skies had darkened, thick clouds swirling ominously. The plane lurched left, wings buffeted by fierce gusts. Rain came next, fast, unforgiving, pelting the glass like tiny martillos. Mantén la calma, confía en los instrumentos, she murmured, her father's mantra. She repeated it, feeling the weight of hundreds of lives on her shoulders. She wasn't just piloting, she was holding the fragile thread of hope for everyone aboard. The cockpit was alive with activity, each button click, dial twist, every brief exchange with air traffic control. But it was Amelia doing the work, guiding the plane through the descent, the massive aircraft responding as if it trusted her, not they. She aligned the approach to Paris Charles de Gaulle, calculated vectors, measured every inch of descent against the runway's position. Her mind was a blur of numbers and coordinates, her hands moving mechanically as she made corrections. The closer they got, the fiercer the storm became. Lightning flashed, illuminating turbulent clouds in violent white bursts. The plane's wings groaned against the wind, air pressure making the walls feel like they were closing in. Estás bien, Emilia, lo tienes, came air traffic control's reassuring voice. The runway appeared, a glowing ribbon of lights in the storm. Amelia's heart thudded, but her mind was clear. She adjusted the yoke, gently guiding the nose down to meet the runway with precision. The moment stretched, agonizingly long, the plane hanging between storm and ground. She eased the yoke back, felt the tires touch the tarmac with a soft thud, then the deafening squeal of brakes as the plane slowed. The plane stilled. Silence. The storm raged outside, but within there was only a heavy, collective exhale of relief. Then applause came, hesitant at first, a few claps, then spreading like wildfire through the cabin. Passengers stood, tears in their eyes, hands clapping, some in disbelief, others overcome. Some cried, some laughed. Amelia sat still, breathless, her body registering the intensity of what had happened. As applause grew louder, a soft sob escaped her lips. She allowed herself one moment of release, the tension of the past hour flooding out. The weight of responsibility, the lives she'd saved, sank in. "Gracias," someone whispered from the back, and Amelia looked up, meeting the eyes of a young madre, her child clutching her leg. Amelia smiled faintly, nodding. She realized everything had changed. She had flown the plane. Geez out. She had landed it, becoming more than a nurse in training, more than a pilot's daughter. She was a hero, not just to herself, but to every soul aboard. For a moment, as the storm raged, Amelia believed she was exactly where she was meant to be. Rain fell in soft patterns over the tarmac, draping Paris in a silver veil, as flashing rescue lights streaked across the wet ground like scattered joyas. The cabin door creaked open, cool night air flooding in, mingling with the scent of adrenaline, fear, and survival. Emergency responders stormed aboard, lifting the unconscious pilots on stretchers. Paramedics shouted vitals, their voices cutting through the storm. For Emilia Castillo, everything muffled, like a thick curtain dropped between her and the moment. She stood near the cockpit door, fingers trembling, slick with sweat, her heart thudding erratically. Oh. One passenger reached for her hand, whispering, "Nos salvaste." Amelia couldn't reply, her throat dry, body exhausted, mind lagging behind the magnitude of her actions. Outside, disbelief buzzed. Reporters gathered at the terminal, scrambling over barricades with cameras raised like tiburones drawn to blood. Airport security tried to hold a perimeter, but whispers spread. The plane landed safely, not by a pilot, but by a 21-year-old nursing student. Passengers descended the stairs, some sobbing, others shell-shocked but grateful. A few paused, eyes scanning for Amelia, their reverence for her quiet strength palpable. Amelia stepped onto the stairs. Flashes exploded, camera lights bursting, capturing her wet hair, the oil smudge on her sleeve, the dazed look in her eyes. She didn't blink, her legs moving automatically into the arms of airport personnel who didn't know what to say. A ground official tried to smile. "Eres increíblemente valiente." Amelia nodded. Microphones came next, voices shouting, "Hihi, Emilia, pilotaste el avión. ¿Cómo sabías que hacker? Estás entrenada. ¿Cómo te sientes?" But the girl at the storm center didn't speak, walking softly, as if stopping would shatter her. A security officer led her through a side door, away from the crowd. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Texts, news alerts, calls from unknown numbers. She silenced it with a shaking hand. Inside the airport, chaos followed. TV screens blared headlines. Estudiante de enfermería aterriza. Avión de pasajeros. Joven heroína salva vuelo. 628. News anchors played grainy footage of the landing. Passengers applauding. Emilia's ghostly figure in view. Clips looped, the story everywhere. People pointed as she passed. Some applauded, others stared. She was taken to a quiet room with a couch and vending machines humming. Someone offered water. Another asked if she needed medical attention. She said no to both, lips pressed in a pale line, eyes unfocused, watching rain streak the window. Her mind replayed it all, the co-pilot slumping, the Capitan's last breath, the silence when she said she could fly, the yoke in her hands, air traffic control guiding her. But it was her hands doing the work, her. Hours passed. An airline official arrived, asking gentle questions. She answered briefly, yes, simulator experience. No, not a licensed pilot. Yes, her father flew. No, she didn't feel like a hero. They said she was free to go, offering transport, but she shook her head. "Quiero ir a casa," she whispered. A quiet car ride, no words from the driver, only glances in the rear view. Paris awoke, bathed in pre-dawn streetlights. Emilia wasn't truly awake, her mind suspended between reality and disbelief. Every moment a film she wasn't sure she'd starred in. Her apartamento was as she'd left it, unmade bed, half-eaten barra de cereales, nursing notes scattered. It was as if the world hadn't changed, except it had. She dropped her bag, stood still, eyes glazed. Slowly, she sat on her bed, pulled her knees to her chest. Her breath hitched, hands gripping the blanket, tethering her to the ground. Tears came, slow, relentless, like the rain outside, not from fear or grief, but the weight of survival. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her phone buzzed, vibrating like a heartbeat. She glanced at the screen. Hundreds of messages, emails, calls, mentions. Her name was trending. Videos of the landing had millions of views. Photos of her, wide-eyed, smudged, brave, were digital posters. One post read, "No merecemos a Emilia Castillo." Another, "Quiero ser como ella." Celebrities shared her story. An aviation page called her the future of flight. Another an icon of instinct and courage. Emilia threw the phone under her pillow, lay down fully clothed, eyes wide. Outside, Paris buzzed, but inside, time stood still. She stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of her life now. She'd boarded a plane for Easter with her parents. That was all, off for the week, barely packed, a quiet visita. But fate had other plans, putting her on the world stage. When she drifted into sleep, it wasn't restful. Dreams came in fragments, blinking dashboards, screaming passengers, her father's voice. "Confía en los instrumentos, mi cielo." The weightlessness as wheels kissed the runway. She slept through morning into afternoon, waking to knocking. She didn't answer, didn't want to. The knock stopped. Later, a crisp white envelope slid under her door. No postage, just a golden seal. She crossed the room barefoot, picked it up like it was fragile, opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a letter, typed, formal, unmistakable. The president of France was inviting her to Paris's Élysée Palace, not a media tour, not an interview, to be honored, to be seen. Emilia stared at the words, her name in the header, the signature below. She sat, and for the first time since the landing, she smiled, a flicker of light after the storm. Because deep inside, she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Scene, Élysée Palace's call. A sharp knock at dawn, outside her apartamento, a black SUV, a man in a suit. Emilia Castillo? She nods, barely awake. He hands a sleek envelope embossed in gold. El presidente de la República Francesa solicita su presencia. Her hands tremble. Cut to Emilia walking through the marbled corridors of the Élysée Palace. In the salon door, the president smiles, extends a hand. "Mostro corai bajo presión imposible," he says. "Francia necesita escuchar su historia." Emilia nods, eyes wide. Her life has taken flight. The sun hung high above Paris, casting golden light over the Élysée Palace gardens, where an audience gathered in quiet awe. Rows of white chairs lined the lush césped, filled with government officials, aviation experts, survivors of Flight 628, and prensa from around the world. Flags fluttered gently, flower arrangements framing a small stage where history was to be honored. Emilia Castillo stood beyond the curtain, her breath calm, heart fluttering like a las de coliri. Dressed in a simple pale blue suit, white blouse, her nursing school pin clipped to her collar. She looked nothing like the headlines branding her Angel del Cielo, but her eyes, soft, determined, carried the weight of all she'd lived and all that lay ahead. Manhattan. The president stepped to the microphone, greeted by applause. His voice boomed, steady, warm. Hoy reconocemos no solo el coraje ante la crisis, sino una fuerza rara, la silenciosa, inquebrantable, que no espera ser llamada. Emilia Castillo no aterrizó ese avión por gloria o fama. Lo hizo porque era lo correcto, porque creía que podía, y porque cientos de vidas dependían de alguien como ella. He turned to Emilia, lifting a velvet box. Por su extraordinaria valentía, inteligencia y acción desinteresada, es mi honor presentarle la médaille de honneur por acte de courage et de dévouement. Emilia stepped into the sunlight, the crowd rising. Applause echoed, rolling like olas against the palace walls. Flashbulbs burst, the wind toying with her hair. As the metal gleamed gold and blue against her chest, Emilia didn't look at the cameras. She looked upward, past the flags, past the clouds, into the endless cielo. She approached the podium with grace born of clarity, not confidence, cleared her throat, adjusted the microphone, and spoke not with flair, but authenticity. Me llamo Emilia Castillo, she said. Tengo 21 años. Soy estudiante de enfermería de Barcelona, y nunca imaginé estar aquí. A ripple of laughter and applause broke gently. El fin de semana de Pascua, subí a un avión para visitar a mis padres. Empaque ligero, ropa, libros de enfermería y manuales de aviación que guardaba por diversión. Verán, antes de querer ser enfermera, estaba obsesionada con aviones. Mi papá, piloto retirado, me enseñaba con juegos de simuladores. Era nuestro momento. No lo sabía entonces, pero cada vez que jugaba, me preparaba para algo más grande de lo que imaginábamos. She paused, eyes flicking to the survivors in the front row, their faces wet, hands gripping each other. Cuando la puerta de la cabina se abrió y supimos que nuestros pilotos estaban caídos, recordé todo lo que mi padre me enseñó, todo lo aprendido de los juegos, los manuales, años observando y sonando. Recordé su voz. Confía en los instrumentos, mi cielo. Y lo hice. The crowd hung on every word. No salvé ese avión sola. Había un médico y una paramédica luchando por mantener vivos a los pilotos. Pasajeros que mantuvieron la calma. Controladores aéreos que creyeron en mí. Pero en ese momento, sentada allí, tuve que creer en mí misma. She looked down, overcome, then found her voice. Lo que hice a la arriba fue pilotar, sí, pero más que eso, fue honrar cada parte de mi pasado que me lo llevo allí. Cada hora estudiando, entrenando, sonando, no fue en vano. La pasión y la preparación nos salvaron. Y creo que todos tenemos algo dentro, esperando ser llamado. Silence, then thunderous applause. The speech went viral within hours, quoted by periodistas, shared globally. But in that moment, Emilia stepped down quietly, her face glowing with peace, not pride. Later, in the palace gardens, she stood alone, the metal warm against her chest. The ceremony ended, guests gone, reporters moved on, but Emilia stayed, letting the moment settle like sunlight into soil. The president returned, walking thoughtfully, handing her a leather envelope with a golden clasp. Abre cuando estés lista, he said. Consideralo un gracias del pueblo francés. She opened it after he left, fingers trembling. Inside, a personal letter on presidential stationery and a donation certificate for 10 million euros in her name. No loan, no award, a gift, no strings attached. Her hands went cold, knees nearly giving way. 10 million euros. Her future, once framed by prestamos estudiantiles and long shifts, cracked wide open. That evening, in her hotel room, she sat by the window, watching Paris lights blink across the Seine. She turned her phone on, met with an avalanche of messages, offers from aerolíneas, medical organizations, publishers, talk shows, scholarships from escuelas she'd dreamed of. One private message came from a young chica in Málaga. Quiero ser como tú cuando crezca. No por ser famosa, sino por ser valiente y amable. Gracias por mostrar lo que las chicas pueden hacer. Emilia read it twice, then again, saved it, didn't reply. Not yet. The next morning, she visited the Musée de l'Air et de l'Espace near Paris, wandering through exhibits with childlike wonder, stopping before a retired Airbus A320. She smiled faintly. Somewhere in her corazon, a whisper returned. Veamos a donde lleva esto. Over the next weeks, the torbellino didn't stop. She flew home to Barcelona, welcomed by strangers with signs, children waving tiny Spanish banderas. She was given keys to her ciudad. Her nursing school established a beca in her name. But Emilia remained the same chica who played simulators with her papa, humble, curious, quietly brave. She used part of her donation to start a foundation for young mujeres in STEM, especially from underrepresented backgrounds, called Futuros del Cielo. Her mission was simple: empower those with dreams hidden beneath the surface, waiting to rise. Some days, she studied enfermería, some days aviación, some days neither, just walked, breathed, watched the cielo, feeling everything she'd carried. As time passed, she didn't let fame change her. She let it guide her. Everywhere, people asked what she'd do next, pilot or nurse. She'd smile. She didn't need to choose. She'd follow every road her corazon opened. Once you've fallen from the sky and landed on your feet, there's nothing left to fear. One evening, months later, she stood at a runway's edge in silence. A private jet sat before her, donated by a compañía, inspired by her story, fitted for emergency medical use and flight education. It bore a name in sleek blue lettering, Emilia Castillo Uno. She stepped toward it, her heart quiet but alive. She climbed into the cockpit, ran her hands over the controls. For the first time since that Easter morning, she whispered, "Veamos a donde lleva esto." With calm hands and a clear cielo ahead, she took off into a future entirely her own. Que viaje, amigos, con Emilia Castillo, la valiente enfermera de 21, años que aterrizó el vuelo 628 y capturó el corazón de Europa. Drop a comment, ¿cuál fue tu momento favorito? Cuando tomó el control o recibió la medalla en el Palacio del Eliseo? Like, share, subscribe for more historia que tocan el alma. ¿Alguna vez has enfrentado un momento que cambió tu vida? Cuéntanos. Tus historias esas inspiran la próxima saga. ¿De dónde nos ves? Dilo abajo. Keep the cielo soaring. Nos vemos en la próxima aventura. If you enjoyed this powerful story about Emilia Castillo, please like and subscribe for more true-to-life stories told with corazon and detail. What are your thoughts on Emilia's journey from ordinary estudiante to heroína? How did you feel when she stepped into the cockpit or stood at the Elysee wearing the medal? What about the 10 million euros donation? When she whispered, "Veamos a donde lleva esto," how did that land with you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us how Emilia, Capitán Castillo, the president, the medico, and the paramedica made this story alive. Rate this story 1 to 10, be honest. Tell us where you're watching from. It's amazing to see how far these historias reach. We'll read your comments. See you in the next story.